So congratulations, Dave, on a very nice hit for the week. If you had a hit this week, whether it was a wager or a very successful DFS lineup, let me know in chat or in the comments of the video, or even let me know on social media. Would be glad to shout you out every week. For yours truly, it was the first losing week in about a month. I did not get a whole lot correct. The only reason I was saved from a disaster of a week is the main lineup that I submitted for the big pitch and putt went pretty darn well. Used Eric Cole and Chris Kirk in that lineup. I went 5 of 6. It was the only reason I have any kind of modicum of success. But overall, a losing week. First one in about a month, as I mentioned. So we are trying to get back on the winning track for the first 2 tournament week of the calendar year. That's right. We have the Arnold Palmer Invitational this week as the designated event, the premier event for the PGA Tour. But there's also a second tournament, the Puerto Rico Open. So there will be a full slate of shows this week on Calls Monday or Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening. So a lot to get into for the entirety of the week, but a lot to get into this evening as well. So let's not waste any more time. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media, Twitter and Instagram. This is where I'll be posting research for both the Arnold Palmer and the Puerto Rico this week. We'll definitely have the Arnold Palmer Invitational research tomorrow. Have that out on both Twitter and Instagram. And then Tuesday, we'll have some Puerto Rico research for you all to look at in preparation for both tournaments this week. And then there is the link to my Twitch channel. This is where I do all of my in-depth research. So tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, I will definitely be live. We will be looking back at the Honda, gathering those statistics, see how my mixed condition model fared. Spoiler alert, not the best. See what I did with my lineups, what I should have done, and then look forward to the Arnold Palmer. Try to figure out any patterns from previous winners and all that stuff. Twitch is also where I am going to be doing a lot of my baseball content, do a lot of gaming. So if you want to see any of that content, give me a follow over at my Twitch channel. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. As I mentioned, want to hear if you had success this evening, or this past week, excuse me. I want to hear from you this evening. Dave, again, congratulations. But if you had a lineup or a wager yourself, what are you looking forward to for the Arnold Palmer? Do you have any players that you're keyed in on early so far this week? Do you think Scotty Scheffler goes back-to-back? Do you think somebody outside the maybe top 5 or top 10 come away with the trophy? We want to hear from you tonight in chat. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 Arnold Palmer Invitational. And we're going to start, as we always do on a Sunday evening, over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. We are at Bay Hill Club and Lodge in Orlando, Florida. You see that it is a par 72. Well, you can't see, unfortunately. It's just getting cut off. It is a par 72, but you see the yardage here, 7,466 yards, a long course this week. So we will definitely be checking on long course metrics. You see the stimp meter set at 12. Generally, that is labeled as fast. These greens have been lightning in years prior, so another week like the Honda where we will be looking at fast and lightning Bermuda greens. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Greens, as you see here, are Bermuda. In fact, there is Bermuda everywhere on the course, overseeded with rye in the fairways and the rough. But again, a long par 72, average green size 7,500 square feet, so about the size of the greens at Riviera, where we were 2 weeks ago. Roughly the same size That equates to larger than average PGA Tour greens. 31 acres of fairway, 100 acres of rough, so a lot of rough in play here at Bay Hill, and 9 holes with water in play. So not as much water as there was at the Honda this week, but still half the holes at Bay Hill have water in play. And we talked about the grass types. The original architect here at Bay Hill was Dick Wilson in 1961. Of course, recently renovated, or most recently renovated by Arnold Palmer himself in 2009. So nothing to do with architects or an architect filter this week. But there you go. There is a look at Bay Hill in terms of a GCSAA tournament fact sheet. We're going to be looking at long courses, fast and lightning Bermuda greens. These greens are larger than the average tour green. 9 holes with water in play, and fast and lightning Bermuda. So with that, I'm going to close that out. Instead of going to Fantasy National, first I am going to bring up Windfinder, as it is very interesting so far for the week. As you can see here, Thursday and Friday. Thursday looks to be somewhat windy, I suppose. Again, we don't have the super forecast this far out. But Friday looks to be mayhem. Now, hot. Highs in the 90s for Thursday and Friday. But you see sustained winds, at least in the forecast, 20 plus miles an hour. Gusts into the mid-30s. And that continues on to a little bit of Saturday. It does calm down a little bit, but still gusts into the mid-20s throughout the weekend. So a lot of wind, at least early on this week, in the forecast for the Arnold Palmer. So we're going to be looking at some wind metrics as well. So I wanted to make you aware of that as we move to Fantasy National to factor in some wind metrics early on in your research. So in response to that, I guess I should say, let's go ahead and check some moderate and windy conditions for the field this week. And you see I've got this set to the beginning of 2022. The Honda is not in yet in Fantasy National, or at least it wasn't about 20 minutes ago. So that will be updated tomorrow. But for the Arnold Palmer and the field this week, your top players since the start of 2022, when a round has been moderate or windy, your top players have been Justin Thomas, Sung Jae, Will Zalatoris, Tony Finau, Keegan Bradley, Shane Lowry, Rory McIlroy, John Rahm, Xander Schauffele, Cameron Young, and Matt Fitzpatrick. So good stuff here. Again, it's early in the week, but it does look like wind is going to be a pretty big factor. So give these players quite a bit of a boost, or put a little bit of extra emphasis into your research around these players, especially for when the wager market opens up tomorrow. But there's a look at your top wind players. We can also look at some long course metrics, as the GCSAA told us that the course is over 7,400 yards. Sometimes it does push into the 7,500 yards, but officially on the scorecard it's about 7,450 or so. So your top performers on long courses since the start of 2022. Those players have been Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, John Rahm, Sung Jae, Will Zalatoris, Rory McIlroy, Jason Day, Shane Lowry, Nate Lashley, and Keegan Bradley. So a little bit of overlap here. Sung Jae, John Rahm, Rory, Will Zalatoris, all of these players were up there in the top 10 in terms of performance in the wind in 2022. Now they're in the top 10 in terms of on long courses. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and take a look at Bay Hill from a scorecard and graphical view here at Fantasy National. And the first thing I like to do is to check the 9th and 10th most difficult holes, see where par falls, to give you an idea of how difficult the course is. Well, the 10th most difficult hole is still over par. The 12th most difficult hole is still over par. You have to come to the 13th most difficult, or conversely, the 5th easiest. I think 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 36th easiest. I can do math, I promise. The 13th most difficult, 6th most easiest hole is where par falls. So we're dealing with another difficult course this week at Bay Hill. Probably not as difficult as the Honda, although the Honda had lower scoring than what it generally has due to the fact that it did not have a lot of wind. That does not look to be the case for the Arnold Palmer. It looks like to have a lot of wind. So I imagine the difficulty is going to be pretty darn high. Par being generally a good score here. Now, you do have a very good eagle chance and a good scoring opportunity in general in the par 5 16th. Plays to almost, or a little over, a half a shot under par. So if you are getting par there, you are losing ground to the field. You do have a couple of other decent scoring opportunities. Not a lot of eagles, though. Even though you have your full allotment of 4 par 5s, there's only one that's above 1.5% in terms of an eagle rate. So a decent amount of birdie chances. Plays to 15 hundredths, to tenths under par and a quarter of a shot under par. So the 4 par 5s are the 4 easiest holes on the course. But conversely, at the other end of the spectrum, I mean, the closing stretch here at Bay Hill, other than the 16th, you've got 2 tenths, 2 tenths, 3 tenths. You've also got 22 hundredths, 2 tenths, just over 2 tenths. There's a lot of bogeys in even some doubles on this course, just due to the fact of the water that is in play. The course is long. The rough gets pretty thick, so we might want to look at some long rough statistics as well. But you can see, at least from the scorecard, quite a few opportunities for bogeys. The 4 par 5s are the easiest holes on the course. So I'm thinking another course that probably is going to mandate some success on par 3s, although we'll get into that when the graphically and in Microsoft Excel. But there's a look at the scorecard for Bay Hill. We move to average strokes gained by shot type per round, and you see this is a ball striking favored course. Approach nearing 1 for players in the top 10. Now, off the tee and around the green are roughly equal. Off the tee is still slightly ahead. That is going to change as you move into the top 5s. The approach goes over 1. Putting does start to catch up around the green and off the tee, probably equidistant from where they were in the top 10s. And then for the winners, the off the tee kind of takes off a little bit from the around the green. But the putting really catches up to the approach. So even though it looks like the short game catches up to the ball striking, I'm still thinking this is going to be more of a ball striker's course just due to the amount of approach here and the fact that off the tee is distancing itself from around the green in terms of importance. But around the green is going to be something this week. Again, the course is long, so greens are not the easiest to hit. Even though they're large, they're not the easiest to hit. So around the green is going to probably have some say in the winner. But we'll reset this for the top 10s. Again, I'm seeing a majority ball striking course, and then your winners are going to be making putts as you would expect. For your average strokes gained by hole by par 3s are really lagging for players that have finished in the top 10, which is a little surprising to me. I would have thought that on a difficult course, players might need to play the par 3s pretty well. But again, this is a par 72, so you have just as many par 5s as you do 3s. Okay, that balances out, I suppose. Par 5s do reach the 2 tenths. Par 3s are still kind of lagging behind. And then for your winners, par 3s really, par 3s actually overtake the par 4s. Now, the par 5s, you still have to score on these. They are the 4 easiest holes. If you're getting par on your par 5s, you're going to be losing ground to the field, especially on the par 5 16th. But par 3s for the winners have been extremely important in years past. And some of the more difficult holes are the par 3s. So let's see. The par 3 17th is the 4th most. You've got the 9th most difficult, 11th, and 3rd. So 2 par 3s that play very difficult, more than 2/10 of a shot over par. And then you have others, and then the 2 others play to about 1500ths and 500ths over par. So for the winners, they are gaining quite a bit of strokes on par 3s. But it was, you can't deny what the graphs are saying. For the top 10s and the top 5s, especially the top 10s, par 3s have really lagged behind. What is consistent is these par 5 scoring. So we're going to have some emphasis on par 5s, I'm sure, this week. Hole composition. With a long course, as you would expect, your most prevalent holes in each par are long. You've got 175 to 200 par 3, 200 to 225 par 3s, and then 225 plus. You do have 2 short, including 1 drivable par 4. In the right circumstances, it can be drivable, but 2 very short par 4s, 3 from 400 to 450, 5 from 450 to 5, and then 1 500 plus par 5 or par 4, excuse me. And then, oh gosh, I'm sorry, that is a par 5, so it is a short par 5. Okay, that's the par 5 16th. So let's try this again. For the par 4s, you do have 2 very short, including 1 drivable par 4. You have 3 par 4s from 400 to 450. And you have 5 from 450 to 5. And then the par 5s, there's 1 short, the par 5 16th, which is a good eagle chance and your best scoring chance on the course. Then the other 3 are from 550 to 6. The approach shot distribution, again, with a long course, probably to be expected. 30% of the approach shots come from 200 plus here at the Arnold Palmer. Compared to 23% of the average tour event. So 6% more common. We'll see if it leads to importance, though. It generally does. But we'll see how much and all that once we go to Microsoft Excel, and especially tomorrow night in the Data Dive show. But approach shot distribution give extra weight to players that are very good from 200 plus early on in your research this week. Historic cut line. To emphasize the difficulty, there has been a couple of years where it got to, you say, -1 and +1, but last year was +4, hovers in the +2 to 4 range, so it is difficult. It is a difficult test of golf. Scoring distribution, you can see that here, 17.6% birdies, 16.7 bogeys, but you actually have a decent-sized doubles bar that you can see here. So you stack the doubles and the bogeys on top of the eagles and the birdies, and the eagles is very minute. So generally there are more scores over par than there are under here. Driving accuracy, higher slightly than the average tour event, 65% versus almost 62%. The fairways are about 30 yards wide at their average width here at the Arnold Palmer. So these fairways aren't the most difficult to hit, but players do know that if they are off the fairway, it is very, very tough in the rough here. So sometimes players do prefer to hit 3 woods instead of driver if they're not confident with their driver, but driving accuracy isn't a big factor as these fairways are fairly wide. Now the greens, again, course is long, course is difficult. 60.5% versus a 66% regulation percentage for the average tour event. So these greens are very hard to hit, even though they're large. So I have another feeling that greens are going to be a pretty big factor this week. Scrambling percentage players are roughly just about as successful scrambling here as they are at other tour events. So I don't know how much we're going to do specifically with scrambling. We might just be looking at strokes gained around the green in that case. 3 putts per round due to the speed and the size of the greens, but mainly the speed. 3 putts per round are slightly more common than the average tour event here, so we'll see if that is a factor. And then distance-wise, even though the course is long, you see 278 yards, or actually closer to 277, versus a 283 for the average tour event. Players know that if they're not in the fairway, it's pretty penal. So again, they will hit 3 woods, sometimes even irons, but most of the time they will hit 3 woods or fairway woods to make sure they're in the fairway as opposed to hitting driver. Green regulation proximity over 30 feet here at the Arnold Palmer versus 29 feet at the average tour event. Doesn't sound like a lot. It's about 1.5 feet, but that means it's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult to be very close to the hole. So total procs might be something we want to look at as well, but we are definitely going to scrutinize and see if the 200 plus is something we want to focus. So there's a look at Bay Hill in terms of a graphical and scorecard view in Fantasy National. Knowing that we are on Bermuda greens, let's go ahead and check that. I'm going to remove the long course filter. And before I add the speed filter to this, we'll take a quick look at the tournament conditions. Now, the past 3 years has been extremely difficult. 2020, 21, and 22, all but one round has been difficult. However, before that, the tournament was generally fairly easy. So they really toughened the course up starting in 2020. And until we see a pattern otherwise, I am going to think that the tournament is going to be difficult again. As you can see, the rough has always been long, but I believe they started to really lengthen it in 2020. The greens have always been lightning fast, or at least majority of the time have been lightning fast all the way back to 2017. So we're dealing with lightning speed greens, long rough. Now hitting the fairways has been difficult at times, although it has been easy to average as well. Greens are generally firm, and we've always been on Bermuda. So there's a look at the prior course conditions at Bay Hill, especially these past 3 years where I'm really focused, as it's been very difficult the past 3 years. So now, having seen that we've been mainly on lightning speed greens, I highly doubt there's enough rounds, even if I expand the timeline. Let's try 2020 and see how many rounds there are on just lightning Bermuda. Actually, there's quite a few. 44 from Sungjae. If we go to 2021, how many do we have there? If we have enough rounds, might just stick with the lightning. Yeah. So we've got probably a third of the field that has 20 or more rounds on lightning Bermuda only, and the majority of the field has at least 10 rounds. Okay. We're just going to stick with lightning Bermuda greens. So since the start of 2021, your top performers on lightning Bermuda greens have been Matt Fitzpatrick, Bo Hostler, Justin Rose, Zach Johnson, Brendan Todd, Thomas Detry, Taylor Montgomery, Mackenzie Hughes, Sam Burns, and Seamus Power. Again, Bermuda Burns, you always got to think about him. Zach Johnson, typically, just a good putter in general, but generally putts Bermuda very well. Let's see. Sepp Straka generally putts very, very well on Bermuda, but he might actually be more fast Bermuda. Let me see where old Sepp Straka is. 34th. Okay, so he's a little bit further down than I thought, but not terrible. Gaining 0.3 per round on specifically just Lightning. But Sepp Straka is also someone you want to think about on Bermuda greens. Tyrrell Hatton, absolutely somebody to factor on Bermuda greens, especially Lightning Bermuda greens. You might be surprised not to see Billy Horschel all that high up. I have noticed that he generally puts slower speed greens, specifically slower Bermuda speed greens, better. But it is still Bermuda. You still got to factor Billy Horschel. But anyway, there is a look at your top putters on specifically Lightning Bermuda greens since the start of 2021. Let's see. We can take a look at some long rough, I suppose. Not sure how much I want to put a lot of emphasis into that, but we can take a look at least. And I'll bring this back in to the start of 2022. So your top performers, total performers, when rough is long since the start of 2022 has been Rory McIlroy, Max Homa, Tony Finau, Xander, Will Zalatoris, Sung Jae, Justin Thomas, Keegan Bradley, Sam Burns, and Matt Fitzpatrick. So not sure how much I'm going to be doing with long rough, but that information is at least there for your using early on this week. But the biggest thing that I want to look at, and we just saw in the historic conditions, is difficult. The last 3 years, this tournament has been very, very difficult. So your top performers when a round has been difficult since the start of 2022: Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Matt Fitzpatrick, Will Zalatoris, Keegan Bradley, Sung Jae, Max Homa, Shane Lowry, John Rahm, and Justin Thomas. So again, with a designated event, the best on the PGA Tour are here. Your top players are going to rise to the top as if this was a major. So be on the lookout for these players throughout the week, especially in your research. Let's get some overarching data here. Let's take a look at some off the tee, some approach. Let's start with approach. Your top strokes gained approach players since the start of this PGA Tour season, so only going back to the fall, the Fortinet. Your top strokes gained approach players: Tom Hoge, John Rahm, Ricky Fowler, Tony Finau, Xander, Gary Woodland, Nick Hardy, Max Homa, Scotty Scheffler, Tom Kim, and Colin Morikawa. We looked at putting. Let's take a look at around the green. Do I want to add any filters? I definitely don't want to mess with long rough. I'm a little shy about difficult, only because scrambling here is not necessarily the most difficult. I don't know. The rough has always been long here, so I suppose we can take a look at some long rough. So your top strokes gained around the green players when rough has been long since the start of 2022: Sam Burns, Lucas Herbert, Sung Jae, Tyrrell Hatton, Kevin Kisner, Brendan Todd, Max Homa, Justin Lauer, Tommy Fleetwood, and Justin Rose. So good stuff there. I think that's going to do it for in terms of statistics or anything specific. Let's go ahead and jump straight into the tournament history, strokes gained total tab, and then move to Microsoft Excel. So specifically here at Bay Hill, in the past 5 years, your number one strokes gained total player, and it is not particularly close, is Rory McIlroy. He won in 2018. He also has another top 5, 2 other top 10s, and a top 15. So nothing outside T13 for Rory in the past 5 years here. Comes fresh off the win at the Honda. Chris Kirk's number 2, and it's only been 4 years in terms of strokes gained total here at Bay Hill. But he has played very well here. Matt Fitzpatrick is 4 for 5, 4 for his last 4. including a runner-up and 3 other top 10s. Sung Jae has played very well here. Tyrrell Hatton won in 2020. Of course, your defending champion, Scotty Scheffler, is 2 for 2, a win and a T15. Charlie Hoffman has played very well here in the past 5 years. Christian Bezadenhout, Tommy Fleetwood, Keegan, Tyrrell Hatton. So these are some players to really focus on in terms of if you put a lot of value into course performance or prior course performance. Some other notables here: Keith Mitchell was T6, T5. He's kind of fallen off the last 2 years, but T5, T6 makes sense. Difficult course, Keith Mitchell generally plays well on difficult courses. Max Homa's 3 for 3, everything inside of top 25. Patrick Rogers is 5 for 5. Victor Hovland 4 for 4 with a runner-up last year. Corey Connors is 2 for 4, a third and a T11 the last 2 years, but he did miss the cut his first 2 years. Let's see. You've got another winner in Francesco Molinari in 2019 here. Winner there, top T26, and then missed the cut in 2021. The 2021 winner, not allowed to participate. He is a live player now. Bryson is the winner in 2021. And then 2019, we talked about is Molinari. 2018 is Rory. 2020 is Hatton. And 2022 is Scheffler. So those are your past 5 winners specifically here at Bay Hill. But there's a look at some of the players that have played Bay Hill well the past 5 years. The other end of the spectrum, players that have not played well here. You've got Wyndham Clark. Interesting to see Sepp Straka, even though he loves fast and lightning Bermuda greens, he's 0 for 3 here. Siwoo, 1 for 5. Now, he didn't make the cut to a pretty good finish last year, but was very poor before that. Kevin Kisner. This doesn't feel like a Kevin Kisner course. It's long, and he just doesn't have the length to compete sometimes. Shane Lowry, 0 for 3 here. Scott Piercy's 1 for 4. Interesting to see Lucas Glover, 4 for 5 in making the cut, including a top 10, but is pretty high in the negatives in terms of strokes gained total. Let's see, Brian Harmon's 2 for 3, but negative. Seamus Powers, 1 for 3 in making the cut. Peter Malnati, 0 for 2. Padraig Harrington, 2 for 4. Kevin Streelman, 2 for 4. So there's a look at some of the players that have not played Bay Hill well in the past 5 years. So that'll lead to a pretty good transition. Let's go over to Microsoft Excel and examine Bay Hill in a pretty statistically intense way, data-intensive way. This is my course evaluation chart. It compares full field courses. I know the Arnold Palmer, the Genesis, places like that, or tournaments like that, aren't technically full fields, but they're pretty close to it. So I consider it a full field. I just don't include places like the Masters, which is about 90 to 95 players, or courses that rotate, say the other majors. The RBC Canadian will not be at the same course as it was last year, so we're going to have a new course to examine there. So this is comparing the course of the week, in this case Bay Hill, against all the other consistent full field courses on the PGA Tour. You can see off the tee and approach, roughly 5% more important in each. Apologies, moving stuff out of the way here. But around the green is 24% more important. Even though it was the smallest in terms of strokes gained in the charts, compared to all of the other courses, the number is actually pretty high. And we'll see that in the detail here. I need to scroll down as I was still on the Honda. 1.26 for the top 30 finishers the past 5 years, and this is a pretty low outlier, so that number is just going to go up in terms of the importance of around the green. The course is long, it's difficult. Around the green is probably going to play a modicum of a factor. How much, we'll try to figure out throughout the week. But around the green is going to be something that we want to focus on. Distance is also going to be something that we probably want to take a look at. 64% more important. And again, just take a look or listen to the winners. Scotty Scheffler, he can move it. Now, Tyrrell Hatton doesn't, but he's been more of the strokes gained around the green, scrambling type. Rory, Molinari was a big hitter in 2019. So, generally speaking, your longer hitters do have an advantage here. So we will see, especially tomorrow on the Data Dive show, if driving distance ends up being a big factor like the stats or the data is telling us it is. We'll see. I thought early in the week, last week for the Honda, the distance might be something and turned out not to be, so we'll see. It's interesting to see good drives gained be a little bit positive, yet fairways and greens are slightly negative. So if we come over here and maybe try to check for some outliers, and again, apologies, going back to the distance, it's just been very consistent too in terms of importance. It's just been consistent. As a statistician, I like consistency. Interesting to see here, fairways, this is a very, very low outlier. So this actually looks like it could probably jump up into the positives. Well, close. It's about 0.5% less important, but okay, we do have a low outlier there. Greens, we actually have a pretty high outlier here. So maybe greens aren't as important. That's why we go through the prior leaderboards in the Data Dive show tomorrow night. Let's take a look at some scoring. If par is a good score, then generally speaking, I think, or at least my first initial thought process is to look at bogeys avoided, and certainly enough, bogeys avoided look to be more important than birdies gained. This actually might be another tournament that we look at double bogey avoidance. Would make some sense. There's a bit of water around the course. The course is difficult if you can avoid double bogeys. It's been fairly consistent. Now that's a little bit of a higher number for an outlier, but nothing too drastic. That's actually a very low outlier for bogey avoidance. So looking like we are going to be focused on the bogeys for the start of the week, and we'll try to confirm that tomorrow. All right, so already I see a big outlier in terms of par threes, and we saw this in the graphs. The par threes didn't look like they mattered until the winners, at least for the top 10s, 15 or top 10s and top 5s. For the winners that did, if we take out that low outlier, I wonder what this moves it to. Still -7, so nothing that would scream terribly important. But we did focus on par threes for the Honda, and that's what part of tomorrow on Twitch will be, is to analyze how the tournament actually played and to see where I was correct and incorrect in assigning my mixed condition model and my emphasis. But par threes at the Honda were a 1.7. Here, they're about a 1.35. So maybe they're not as important as I initially thought, except for the winners. I just could have been wrong there. We'll see. If there is a length, okay, look at this. If there is a length, it's very clearly the 200 to 225, which would make sense. 2 of the 4 par threes measure to that length. I'm actually going to go to Fantasy National again here very quickly and see where the lengths are. Yeah, you can see that. It's vision skewed, but okay, so you got 231. It's conceivable that could drop to the 200 to 225. 221 falls into there. 215 is pretty solidly set in there. And then 199. Okay, so there conceivably that could be a day where every single par 3 measures 200 plus. Very good. So even though that is a high outlier, you're still looking at par 3s from 200 to 225 being more than double in the importance than the average full field course. So instead of par 3s, we might just be looking at just the 200 to 225, 225 plus, but it looks like heavy emphasis into the 200 to 225. Especially because looking at the raw data, I mean, my goodness, 0.92 is what, 3/4, 80% of the strokes gained total in par 3s. Seems like we're going to be emphasizing those. Par 4s, moving over to them, fairly consistent. You've got a couple of higher numbers here, but nothing extraordinary. And those numbers seem a little small. Yeah, so 6% less important in total. The 350 to 4s, at least percentage-wise, are looking to be the most important, but there's only 2 of those here at Bay Hill. Now, in terms of the raw numbers, it's the 400 450. So remember, there's 2 this length, 3 this length, and 5 this length at Bay Hill. None of them are making up half of the total in strokes gained par 4. So we might not be looking at a specific length. Interesting. We got a couple of very low numbers here. Other than that, I don't know. That is something we'll definitely be scrutinizing tomorrow on the Data Dive show. I'll be doing it, of course, tomorrow over on Twitch for the heavy, in-depth research. So, again, I encourage you to join me in the morning. Even if you're not able to watch live, just have the sound going as I will be talking through analyzing these statistics. But as of right now, it doesn't look like there's anything for par 4s specific. Par 5s, a slightly high, I was going to say slightly high outlier, but this is actually more of a low outlier than the other one is a high. Okay, so par 5s, 17.5% more important. So perhaps I was incorrect in my initial assumption. Perhaps it's par 5s that we just really need to focus on this week. And then specifically the par 3s. Interesting. You see the one par 5 that is 500, 550 is not important in terms of percentage. It's in the 550 to 600s, which makes sense. 3 of the 4 fall into that range. All right. Yeah. Come on, undo. Very interesting. So looking like we have quite a bit in the par 5s to look at. And if there's a range, it's the 550 to 6. Now, the 0 to 500 is just the one hole that's getting moved. How much do you want to put emphasis into that? I don't think very much. Okay, lastly, procs. Procs total actually isn't as high as a number as I thought it would be, but look at the massive number there in the 200 plus. And in fact, 200 plus didn't seem like it mattered all that much last year, but in 2021 it was the deciding factor seemingly. So if we look at in terms of versus other courses, so 4.5% positive there. You got 125 to 150, but yeah, the 200 plus, oh shucks, it's getting cut off. The 200 plus, 86% more important. 86 more important in terms of the 200 plus proximity. So when looking at proximity, we're going to be very, very high or using the 200 plus a lot this week. I still think total procs might have some factor, but certainly the 200 plus. So to end off the evening, let's go ahead and move to what I call the early look file, or this is the tournament history tab in Fantasy National, brought to Microsoft Excel. The strokes gained total distributed throughout where the players have performed. So we saw that the top strokes gained total player the past 5 years has been Rory. He has played 5 times in the past 5 years at Bay Hill. He's averaged a 7th place finish. He's averaged 3.9 strokes gained approach each year at Bay Hill, 2.6 off the tee, 2.5 on the greens, etc., etc. Well, so this is their performance specifically at Bay Hill. I am going to filter out the players that have only played it once. I want to see the players who have played here consistently and have played here consistently well, what they've been doing well here. So we'll take a casual look here, and we'll go to the top 35. Yeah, players who have averaged a top 35 finish in the past 5 years. So you've got off the tee here, which is a 1.5. That's pretty high. Nothing in terms of heavy green, but Will Zalatoris, Keith Mitchell, Victor, Rory, even Emiliano Grillo's been pretty good off the tee here. So you got a 1.5 approach, 1.8, and you have 3 players that were negative in approach. 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Around the green, it looks a little bit less. It's a 1.0. Nothing too crazy high except for Scotty Scheffler. It just looks like it's been a modicum amount of success. And then putting, other than Hideki and Ben On, who are just generally not good putters, 1.2. So pretty consistent to what we have seen throughout the evening, especially over at Fantasy National. It is a ball striking course, like I thought it would play out. The best ball strikers are the ones that play their best here. Let's take a look at, say, distance and then good drives gained was the metric that was positive in relation to other full field courses. So you got Grillo, who's performed very well here at the tournament and been very good at good drives. Jason Day, Ben On, Harris English. Distance-wise, of course, Rory, Will Zalatoris, Keith Mitchell, J-Day, Ben On. Tommy Fleetwood has been positive in distance here at Bay Hill. Interesting to note. Hovland, no surprise. Rogers. Okay. We'll go to scoring. Bogeys, birdies, all that stuff. So the top 2 here, at least players that have played here more than once and have had sustained success. Slightly more in the bogey avoidance, but they're generally just about even. Now, Chris Kirk has done all of his work in gaining birdies and hasn't avoided bogeys all that well. He's avoided the double bogeys well. Sungjae bogeys, Max Homa bogeys. I mean, even Bezuidenhout is more positive in bogeys as well. Fitzpatrick bogeys. So 6 of your top 7 are higher in bogey avoidance than birdies gained specifically here at Bay Hill, and that's probably a lot to do with their success. Now, Scotty Scheffler's gained plenty of eagles as well, but generally there's only one eagle chance on the course. But we'll move to par 3s, and surprisingly, the 200 to 225 par 3s really don't look like they're adding much in terms of performance. You got quite a few players that are negative in that range, but yet they're positive mostly in par 3s. So just for comparison's sake, the top 35, or players that have averaged a top 35, this is a 0.8 in strokes gained par 3s. You have a 3.1 in par 4s, and you have a 1.7 in par 5s. So par 5s are doubling the par 3s in terms of importance. Okay, we kind of saw that in the comparison course. I'm just surprised to see that the fact that the 200 to 225 hasn't been a big correlating factor for the players that have consistently played well here. But perhaps when we go through the leaderboards tomorrow, perhaps consistently the top, say 25, 30, whatever, have performed well at those links. It's interesting to see. Par 4s, they look like they're mitigated a little bit in importance here. And it doesn't look to be at a specific length other than maybe the 400 to 450. But these, for par 4s, these are not big numbers. We've seen, gosh dang it, we've seen numbers in the 10s and 11s in terms of par 4s. So the highest that you're seeing here is a 6.5. That's not very high for par 4s. So just be aware of that. Not a whole lot here in par 4s. And then par 5s, you see Scotty Scheffler just took advantage of the short par 5 here at Bay Hill. But par 3s are pretty darn consistent. You really only have 2 players that are negative in terms of strokes gained par 5. Only 2 players negative. So par 5 seems to be a pretty big importance here at Bay Hill. Lastly, let's take a look at some proximity, total and the 200 plus. So total procs, again, you got 1 negative here, but again, that's over the course of 4 rounds. He's played here 5 times. That's pretty darn close to field average. Now, Jason Day's been really bad at total procs, just to be fair. Keith Mitchell and Patrick Rogers has been pretty bad. But you only have 4 players that are negative in terms of total procs that have performed very well year over year here. And if you look at 200 plus, you got some pretty big numbers in here and some consistent success. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I mean, even again, with the 18.5, 16.5 here, maybe the 27. Those are pretty close to field average, especially the 18 and the 16. 27's getting into just not good territory. And then, the 99 and 35, 50, those are pretty bad. But you also got some, look at Rory. Very good at 200 plus here. Grillo, Zalatoris, Chris Kirk. Keegan's 5 for 5 here. Average finish inside the top 30. Look at his 200 plus procs. Victor Hovland's 4 for 4 here. Tom Hoagie's been the best and had some pretty good success here. So definitely going to be having quite a bit of 200 plus proximity early on in the forefront of my mind when evaluating players for wagers and early DFS leans this week. So I'll bring you back to the start of the early look file, the players and their average finish in the past 5 years here. That's going to do it for the initial research show for the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Thanks to everyone who tuned in and listened tonight. Really appreciate it. Again, if you are a winner from the Honda, please let me know, either social media, in the comments of this video. However, I want to be able to shout out members of the community that do well. So again, congratulations to my friend Dave, who had the win ticket on Chris Kirk at 30 to 1. Good hit there for you. And a reminder that this is a full week of shows with a double tournament week. So the initial research, obviously tonight, data dive for the Arnold Palmer tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then Wednesday will be the DFS Tactics show for the Arnold Palmer as usual. Tuesday night will be the full show. Initial research, data dive, and DFS in its entirety, all of it, for the Puerto Rico. So Tuesday, 9 p.m. will be the Puerto Rico Open full show. So if you are interested in partaking in wagers or DFS for the alternate field event, I will be covering that as well. And then as always, tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, I will be live on Twitch going through all of the extensive research for finding the pattern to the winners here historically at Bay Hill, taking a look at last week's Honda, all of that good stuff. So I hope to see you tomorrow over on Twitch. If not, tomorrow night for the Data Dive show. But that's going to do it for tonight's show. Thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers that you made this past week at the Honda, for all of the DFS contests you entered this past week at the Honda. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.